Wishing for my money now about daily update tips and any daily kind of channel. So I'm also be tapping on the subscribe button now so what's up on the notification but anyway also subscribe all the updates because you're Ghana politics or JB so I'm also the comment section you bet you na can kind ede amao idea ura Mahama Ayariga MP4 Boko Central and Ayebisa say and some of course parliament speaker of parliament say same presidency on signing the pass bill parliament phone in Adjatum say on signing a mayor Morgan on Obama no Obama intimi aware no Obama so intimi aware president say the last guy at the court until say Supreme Court man a decision was bill no hon untimi nya hwe mfa hon and speaker no so say sadia almost man kwan ama untimi enya the person yibia Ghana ha. Even though we are selected some people, person call your more ministers, as we are talking now, they are still hanging there at parliament. And so I say, until the court be more quine, among so massa ministers, and go for president has selected so many ministers, on one quine, among ministers. No. Na any bisa Ura Mahama Ayariga say, Nadia no walk fasa and semia elkosi no say, I say. Obi de sa asemi eko court na so Supreme Court until the Supreme Court ebe decide was asem no ho dia onsi and president kwan say mane nkonko sign that bill no say Supreme Court enya making decision dia and president betimi aka say enye men sign ana me sign na onni me president a wo ye mranim for pen no o say e no ho pa say otimi baba ntimpo be ka say I say Supreme Court man decision dia any on so nsan idea just nani kura wu ama yem president no kra afin so o say idea nani ase wu bio ama chese attorney general they are advising and president say mranim ni chese no otimitina ase agitum so be send letter Akroma parliament na idea chese odwon kura wonti ase obi o ye mrani nim a onim say the president has no capacity to send letter say parliament should not do this or should do that. Oh yes, I now disrespect you. You don't know what you're doing at the presidency.
Where you stand on the everything that has transpired over the period, the president's letter first of all to parliament, the speaker's response. What do you think?
Well, I think that people need to be reminded that it didn't start with the president's letter to parliament, or let's say the secretary to the president's letter to parliament, and the advice given by the attorney general. If you recall, parliament through private members bill had initiated, considered, and passed about 3 different pieces of legislation covering such important social issues such as the plight and conditions of witches or alleged witches held up in witches' camps and the inhumane treatment that they have suffered over the years, and the inability of governments for several decades to outlaw and prevent such practices. So we went through a painful process of enacting a legislation that we thought would deal with the problem. And all sides of the House, supported it and voted in favor of the bill. And then we also did the same for the abolition of the capital punishment, that's the death punishment, and transmitted that. And there was a third legislation. And we submitted all these to the president for his assent. And he refused to assent, and he refused to respond to us. And the Constitution is very clear on the process of lawmaking. If the president receives a transmitted bill from us, how he should treat it, the timeline, and etc. And if you recall, the speaker made an open statement in the chamber in respect of this, and we even agreed to schedule a date to debate it and decide what to do to the president in relation to his breaches of the provisions of the Constitution, that is Article 106(7). So this is actually when it started several months ago, about 4 or 5 months ago, last sitting of Parliament. So based on, again, we, through a private member's bill, initiated legislation on the issue of gay, lesbian, LGBTQ plus issues. Also an important social issue that saw almost every section of the Ghanaian population throwing its support behind the initiative, of course, except the president himself. And we finished and then submitted it to him. And then they wrote that letter. First and foremost, the secretary to the president has no capacity to write a letter to Parliament. By our own standing orders and practice, it is only the president himself who can write to us. Secondly, in that letter, they indicate that the Attorney General advised them that there was an interlocutory injunction application in respect of the assent to the LGBTQ bill. But you see, the Attorney General was party to a previous attempt to restrain Parliament from even considering the bill. If you recall, when we started working on the bill, there was an action by one Dr. Nh-Addo at the Supreme Court, in which Nh-Addo sought an injunction to restrain Parliament from even considering the bill, if you recall that application. And the Attorney General was part of this. And the Supreme Court gave a ruling in that matter. The Supreme Court said that, look, when Parliament initiates a bill, we here at the Supreme Court will not interfere in their work until the entire process is completed. And then when it comes out as a law, and you now think that any provision of the law violates the Constitution, you can bring it to us. Then we can consider. But when they initiate the process, till the end of the process, we will not interfere. The reason why they will not interfere is that the process itself has a self-correcting mechanism. So we may be rushing because they may correct themselves in the matter that you think they are going wrong. So just watch them. Wait till they exhaust the entire process before you come to the Supreme Court. This is what the Supreme Court said in the Amanda case, in which the Attorney General was a party. So if you look at it, what is the entire process? The process starts with the initiation of the bill. It goes through first reading, second reading, consideration, and finally, third reading. Now, after third reading, we vote, we pass it, then you transmit it to the president. The president assents. When the president assents, that is when you have actually completed the process. Because the process involves Parliament and the president. So if you take any legislation, you will see that it is said that enacted by Parliament and the President. So the lawmaking process involves Parliament and the President. So the entire process is Parliament and the President assenting. So you cannot say that when Parliament has finished, then the process has ended. No. When Parliament has finished voting and passing it, it is still not law. It is only law when the President assents. But he may refuse to assent, and that is still part of the process. And that process has a mechanism for correcting mistakes. So the President can spot the mistakes and say, no, you've made a mistake. So I will not assent to it. I'm sending it back to you, and I'm going to attach a memorandum showing the portions that I think are mistakes. So correct them and bring them back. Or I'm going to refer it to the Council of State for the advice of the Council of State, because maybe I'm wrong, but let the Council of State advise all of us whether or not we are not making any in these and those other provisions. So that is still part of the process. And the Supreme Court says that so long as the process is ongoing, don't try to stop them. Don't invite us to stop them. Wait till they have completely exhausted the entire process. This is a ruling of the Supreme Court. So the Attorney General, who was a party in the Amanda case, shockingly, surprisingly, and in my opinion, embarrassingly, for his standing as a lawyer and the Attorney General of Ghana, once the process is still going, in the face of this ruling of the Supreme Court, to advise the President that the President should hold on with signing because somebody has gone to the Supreme Court to put in an application for an interlocutory injunction. When the same Supreme Court has already said, we will not under such circumstances interfere. So if you come to us with an application, you are wasting your time because the system has a capacity to correct itself. The Attorney General should have advised the President that, look, in the Amanda Otto case, the Supreme Court has said that until the entire process is exhausted, they will not interfere. So this their application has no merit. It will not be considered by the court because the court has ruled already in the matter. And the process has not been exhausted. And so the President has to exercise his responsibility under the Constitution, which is to either assent or send it back to Parliament with his on which provisions are a violation of the Constitution for Parliament to reconsider and vote on those provisions and then send it back to him again, or refer it to the Council of State for the Council of State to consider it, advise, and then the President will attach the advice of the Council of State and send it back again to Parliament so that we will reconsider those provisions. And if we say no, we disagree with the President, we have to vote by a two-thirds majority and then pass it. If we pass it under those circumstances, the Constitution says that he must assent to it. The President has the majority of the members of Parliament. So if he feels that there are provisions that are a violation of the Constitution of Ghana or that he feels they should not be passed, if he objects to it and he whips his side, it will be tough for the minority to get two-thirds of the House to pass it. So he should have used those mechanisms, and Ghanaians will know that he is against the bill. But this is an attempt to use a so-called application in the Supreme Court by Richard Sky to stifle the passage of the legislation just doesn't cut it. It's amateurish. I am really embarrassed knowing the standing of the President in law to have behaved that way. So clearly, the Speaker is right. And I support the position of the Speaker. And I think that the Speaker's position ought to be supported. The Attorney General has totally disappointed us in the advice that he has given. And as for the Secretary to the President, clearly he has offended Parliament. I'm even surprised that Parliament is not considering citing him for contempt. So I think that this is the situation, the real position of the law, and government has goofed, the presidency has goofed, the Attorney General has woefully failed the President in the quality of his advice, and the position of Parliament to also not consider the nomination and approval of the ministers is based on the position that the Attorney General has taken on the matter, because he takes a position that, once there is an application in any matter, the various organs of government are to stay their hand and keep off the matter until the Supreme Court resolves the issue. And so Parliament is seeking to demonstrate to the President the absurdity of his position. Let him feel the absurdity of his position and see that a country cannot be run that way. That any time that any branch of government is considering a matter and somebody just runs to court and submits any application, irrespective of whether it is meritorious or not, that branch must stop whatever it is doing and wait till the Supreme Court considers the matter. If that is his position on it, fine. Let's apply it to his business also and see how he will feel. That is why we've decided, okay, we also will not consider your nominees until the Supreme Court has resolved the matter based on your own principle of how should applications pending before the Supreme Court. And I think this is a fair position that Parliament has taken. And nobody should condemn Parliament for that, or the Speaker.
And I'll read to you a statement issued by the Attorney General in response to that. But before we get there, first, you said the Executive Secretary should be answering for contempt by now for writing a letter to Parliament. Is that to suggest that you don't consider his letter being as a letter written on behalf of the President?
Whether it is written on behalf of the President or not, the tone of the letter is contemptuous. You have no power to direct Parliament to cease and desist from the exercise of its constitutional responsibility. The Constitution says clearly that when we pass a bill, we should present it to the President. It's a constitutional order directing us. So you, a mere secretary to the President, who is not even occupying a constitutional position, because your position is not known to the Constitution. It is the Office of the President Act that establishes your office. You are not a constitutional office holder. So you cannot sit there and write a letter to us directing us to cease and desist from the exercise of our constitutional responsibility. It is in that respect that I find his conduct contemptuous of Parliament. And it is even more regrettable given his standing at the bar as a senior lawyer. You ought to know better. So that is why I think that his conduct is even more contemptuous of Parliament. As for capacity to write, our standing orders don't recognize him as one of those who can write to Parliament, in his official capacity. The standing orders are clear that those with capacity to write to Parliament, in that manner, will be the President, the Chief Justice, So they can write to Parliament. And since it is a communication from the Presidency, it is the President that should be writing to us, not him.
Now, you also said that the Attorney General shockingly and embarrassing. It means that you are saying that the position he's taking in terms of his advice is shocking and embarrassing for you because of his involvement in the first attempt to injunct the process. But can it also not be said that these are different stages of the process?
It wasn't he who tried to injunct the process.
Yes,
I understand. The respondent. Yes, as a constitutional matter, you have to always, have the Attorney General as a party. If you have the first N.Addo application, you look at the title and you see the Attorney General was a party. So he's aware of this. Even if he wasn't a party, he is presumed to be aware of the law, because ignorance of the law is no excuse. And the interpretation of the Supreme Court of a law is the law also. So while the Supreme Court in the initial N.Addo case had pronounced that it will not interfere in the work of Parliament whilst it is in the process, the Attorney General should know what the process is. He should define the process. What is the entire process? The entire process is processes plus the President's processes, culminating in the assent, which then terminates the process. So until the assent of the process of the President, the process remains uncompleted. So the law is clear that so long as the process is ongoing, the Supreme Court will not interfere. That is what the Supreme Court said. And I expect the Attorney General to know this law, because it is the Supreme Court that said it, and he was a party. So if he should know the law, and yet he went ahead to advise the presidency not to assent, and worse still, that they should not even receive the bill presented to them. I mean, it's so embarrassing. I am scandalized that the Attorney General will give advice to the President.
Weye ura mahama yaruga MP4 oko central na hotel nka wo chese ya dia wodi president who ye pa because onim ni se onim ra ni pa inte na won to otimi ba bon tempo be kan say Supreme Court man decision ewo asem ya the last guy e dia court no ho ontimi mesan ya dia no ho ye no ye pa na felling so am president. Se besi onya subscribe ya meso so ko no ko tap on the subscribe button na afin so tap on the notification bell so na be ya onso o mesi any information out any besi idea macro